Welcome to our monthly roundtable panel discussion. The Declaration of Independence clearly and for the whole world to know stated that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We speak of life and we speak of liberty very often. Today we're going to discuss the pursuit of happiness, what exactly it means, and why it seems that the world is not a very happy place these days. Let me introduce our panelists for today's discussion. Lee Parker is one of the last of a dying breed of principled and honest individuals who genuinely seeks to give to others from her wealth of life experiences. Lee is producer for the Global Freedom Report and administrative director of Freedom Bound International. Her work has provided her with first-hand exposure to the injustices of the world. Lee is also a spiritualist who believes that there is so much more to life than most people acknowledge. She seeks to bring joy to the world. In the midst of chaos and injustice, Lee brings the light of hope to all those whom she touches. Lee Parker, thank you for joining us on the Global Freedom Report.
Thank you, Brent.
Lee, I understand you're currently learning scriptural Hebrew so you can read Scripture in its original form and not be subjected to distorted information. What drives you? What drives you to seek the truth, not just in Scripture, but in your everyday life?
Well, it all started when I started to understand that in our history books, that history itself had been changed, it had been monitored, things had been left out, and I realized that we did not have truth in our history books. And then I started looking at truth in other areas, and I saw that it was sorely missing. And then I went to the scriptures, and I found out, as I know right now, that we only have in our scriptures today 60% of the original text. And I said, well, wait a minute. What happened to the other 40%? Isn't that relevant as well? Isn't that important? And so that I've been looking at for systems or for classes to learn Hebrew, biblical Hebrew specifically, so that I can inform myself, not leaving it to an outside source to tell me, but to learn for myself what truth was presented in that writing and how I can apply it to my everyday life.
Well, thank you for that, Lee. Kimberly Clark Sharp is our second panelist, and she has earned the title of near-death comedienne through her many presentations about near-death experiences. She's the founder and president of the Seattle International Association for Near-Death Studies, the oldest and one of the largest groups of its kind in the world. She is the author of the near-death classic After the Light, educating thousands about the near-death experience with much humor and tact, delivering the serious message that we do not end at death in an irresistibly humorous package. Guided by a new sensitivity to the presence of angels, demons, and other invisibilities, Kimberly attained a master's degree in social work at the University of Washington and began a career in medical social work that put her in direct contact with dying people and people who almost died and came back. Kimberly Sharp Clark, welcome to the Global Freedom Report.
Hello, Brent. Thank you.
Good to have you.
Thanks.
From your bio, a quote, "Death is nothing to fear, and life without fear can be lived to the fullest." This seems to be your credo since your extraordinary near-death experience. In just about 2 minutes, can you briefly describe it for us?
All right. And my apologies to listeners. I am fighting laryngitis, so but really happy to be here and be heard. I dropped dead. I was with my dad. His perspective was an hour and a half resuscitation. Obviously, I got oxygen, but it was still a long resuscitation, so I had a long near-death experience, which included going to a gray, warm, wonderful place, and then being in the presence of a light that I call God, but certainly you could call anything you want Charles. It doesn't matter if it's said reverently. I was sent back. I missed my body about 4 feet, so I had to deal with that for a while until I got back in, and then changed my mind about wanting to be back in my body. Not like I wanted to leave God anyway, but God showed up again, and I was allowed to almost enter heaven, and then was distracted by a series of pictures, if you will, that showed my life if I chose to live it. And what really nailed it for me is that I saw myself being of service, something I had never, ever considered before, to be honest. And I said something about cool, and then I was back, and that was my choice. And God has put me in a place to be in service ever since then, and in a place where I can comfort and inspire people that are afraid of all kinds of things, including death, of course.
Kimberly Sharp, our second panelist, and our third panelist is Gordon Mathews. He is professor of anthropology at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, where he has been since 1995. He is the author of What Makes Life Worth Living, How Japanese and Americans Make Sense of Their Worlds, Global Culture, Individual Identity, Searching for the Home in the Cultural Supermarket, and the recently published Ghetto at the Center of the World, Chungking Mansions, Hong Kong. He has also edited a number of books, including the appropriately titled Pursuit of Happiness, Well-Being in Anthropological Perspective. All his work relates to the basic question of how individuals today find meaning in their lives. Professor Gordon Mathews, welcome to the Global Freedom Report.
Thank you. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you. You conducted a research project on making anthropological theory relevant to everyday life. In 200-300 words or less, what is anthropology and how does it relate to our lives?
Well, I can't count words while I talk, but anyway. Anthropology is the study of different people in different places, different cultures. And one thing I want to talk about a little bit today, I'm sure we'll get to, is that while in one sense all human beings want to be happy, happiness isn't necessarily the same thing in different places. And different groups of people do think a little differently about what happiness means. And that has to be remembered. So when we talk about the pursuit of happiness in the American Declaration of Independence, is this the same happiness that somebody in Japan or in Saudi Arabia or in Chile might hold? In some sense, yes, but in some sense, maybe not.
Well, and that's an excellent place for us to start. So let's start with you, Professor Mathews. And I'm actually going to ask all of our panelists to answer this first question. But let's start with the basics. What is happiness? How do you define what it means to be happy? And where have we gone wrong? Because, frankly, people all over the world seem to be anything but happy.
Yeah, excellent question. And, I'm not going to give you a philosopher's definition. In one sense, happiness is when you feel it, you know what it is. Leave it at that. But the interesting thing is, one thinker wrote something like, if you pursue happiness, you'll never find it. And what I think he meant by that is, if you think, am I happy? Am I happy? Then you can't find it because you're too self-conscious. Happiness, this guy said, and he may be right, is almost something that happens as a byproduct. In other words, you're living your life, you're pursuing your ideals, you're doing things for other people, and then happiness creeps in and you think, wow, I'm happy. And that's a very interesting idea. Maybe happiness is not something you need to always be thinking about and have directly in front of you. Rather, it's something that comes into your life sort of from the side, and you realize that happiness is there because you're helping the world, you're serving others, and so on. That may be one aspect of what happiness is.
Well, but is there any way to approach the question where you can come up with a definitive answer? Since, as you said, what's happiness, pursuit of happiness, Declaration of Independence isn't necessarily what makes somebody happy over in Kenya, or over in Hong Kong, or over, in any other part of the world. Is there any way to accomplish an answer, to achieve an answer to the question, what is happiness?
Okay. Now, a lot of social scientists have gone around the world asking people in surveys, are you happy, or do you have a sense of life satisfaction on a scale of 0 to 10, for example. The problem is always that to do this, you've got to translate happiness from one language to another, because obviously most people don't know English. And then the real question is happiness the exact same thing in one society as compared to another? Well, no. There is a term, something like happiness, in most of the world's languages, or even all the world's languages. But these terms aren't exactly the same. There are subtle differences. And even happiness itself in English is a confusing term. I mean, you eat a good meal, you say, I'm happy. You discover God, you say, I'm happy. You get married, you say, I'm happy. But we're not talking about the same thing in these three cases. So even in American society itself, what happiness is not altogether clear, because it's used in different ways in different contexts. So, you see how confusing this is. I think any universal grab bag definition of this is happiness and applies to all people ain't going to work, because you've got such differences.
All right, Lee Parker, how would you answer to the question, what is happiness, and where have we gone wrong, since people all over the world are just plain not happy? How do you respond to that?
I would concur a lot with Gordon on this, because I think it is elusive, because it is multi-defined. It depends upon conditions. But I also agree that in the pursuit of happiness, what it implies is that happiness is outside of you. And I don't know that in the times that I have been happy, that it has been an external experience. It is an internal experience of contentment, of joy, fleeting though it may be. Like, I can be happy listening to my kitty cat purr. That makes me happy. And when I leave or my kitty cat doesn't purr, does that mean I'm unhappy? So it is difficult to define, but it is easier to know. And so I think it's individual, it is situational, and it is internal.
Kimberly, where have we gone wrong? Okay, why is it that we do not have a world in which people are just overwhelmingly happy?
When we were born, was there a sign over Earth that said, this is the happy place? I'm listening to this going, let's see, when in history has the world been happy? Speaking from the perspective of the near-death experience, this is school, not heaven. And speaking from the perspective of a social worker, I have seen people dying and not miserable because their pain has ended because of a drug. Or I have been around the world a lot, too, and I've seen people with nothing by Western standards, but yet they have a sense of safety, a roof over their head, so to speak, even if it's palm leaves, clean water, clean food, and a private place to go to the bathroom, and they're happy. So I agree with the relativity, but I don't agree that we should try to make Earth happy. It's, as I've said before, the Earth is filled with people, and as far as people go, can't live with them and can't live with them.